welcome to another episode of the Space Force Mascot Moonicles. Today's title is The Memory of the Rainbow Heart in the Mist of the White-Shouldered Man. Diary entry from 30th November 2020. It was a lovely moon day and cold enough for boots, and I went to the park with a little pond by Uncle Tom's Street. There I stood on the root of the weeping willow, and while the ends of her naked branches were playing with my hair, I remembered the beautiful water lilies and the baby ducks sleeping under their cover. And I remembered watching the herring watch the water. And when I looked up, I saw a little rainbow in the form of a smile. And I couldn't help but smile back. And there I stood smiling at the smiling rainbow in the sky until it disappeared. Wondering if anyone else had seen this heavenly display, I slowly walked up the little eminence towards my favorite bench built around an oak tree, where I had once sun and moon bathed at the same time. I sat down and dusk came, and I watched the meeting of day and night. And I saw night kiss day farewell. And in total darkness I saw the fathers of night, and they sent the stars, and the full moon followed to rule night's shadow on earth. I enjoyed the pond and the trees in their mystifying moonlight dress, and I listened to their stellar song. When I saw a huge boar, the size of a suburban truck, with a huge pair of tusks come out of the bushes, he approached the bench and said, "Pardon me, I have an itch on my back. Would you care to scratch it?" "Of course," I answered promptly, and I stood up on the bench, and I scratched his back from head to tail as far as I could reach. He liked it very much, and he purred like a cat, and when I was done scratching, he said, "Thank you. And remember, on your next mission as First Space Force Mascot, you have what it takes." I was naturally happy to hear that, and I told him, "Good." And he agreed, "Good." And he turned around and disappeared into the bushes. I didn't know what else to do, so I just sat there and waited until a white-shouldered man in a black cloak and a black hat approached the bench, and without asking, he sat down next to me and he said, "You are lucky to see me." Really? I was surprised and excited at once, and I asked him, "Where are we going?" He leaned back and looked up into the night sky and said, "How about the moon?" "Fantastic!" I cheered and clapped my hands. And the white-shouldered man in black moved his arms through the air, and a heavy fog came up, and the light of the moon and the stars faded away, and the shadow of night disappeared from the earth, and when all the lines were blurry, he said, "In 1, 2 claps, we will arrive at our destination." He clapped his hands once, and it was pitch dark. He clapped his hands again, and a dim light came on from underneath, and there was nothing to see but a white sandstone desert, shimmering only for itself without reflection under a naked sky. "Look there," he said, and he drew a perfect circle with his finger, and it appeared before my eyes as he explained it. "I lay before you the miraculous view of a marvel called Earth." Almost hypnotized by this unbelievable picture, I dreamed only rainbow unicorns could top this. And I looked around and wondered, where's the water? "It is not here," he said. "Look there," he said again, and he drew another perfect circle. "Flying horses," he declared. And I looked, and there were flying horses. As I looked closer, I noticed their legs were not moving. And I didn't like it, and I asked the man of the fog, "What's wrong with the horses? Their legs aren't moving." "What's wrong with you? Don't you see that they have wings?" I wasn't convinced, and I scratched my head. And the man in black stood up from the bench, stretched out his arms and shouted, "Look at me!" And he moved his arms again, and more fog came up, and his left hand turned red, and a long-stemmed red rose magically appeared between his fingers. Again, he drew a perfect circle in the mist, and one by one her petals fell. And when all her petals laid out in the shimmering sandstone dust before the bench, I felt very sad. And I got down on my knees and I played with the rose petals in my hands, and I felt their texture between my fingers. And I remembered the fairy tale of the princess on the thorn, where the sensibility of the princess is tested by placing a thorn on the grounds of the bed frame and stacking 20 mattresses on top and 20 eiderdunen beds on top of the mattresses. The next day they asked her, "How did you sleep?" And she said, "Oh, horribly bad. I barely closed my eyes all night. God knows what was there in the bed. I was laying on something sharp. My whole body is now red and blue. It's terrible." And she passed the sensibility test, and they knew that she was a real princess. I raked the rose petals together, and suddenly the smiling rainbow came to mind, and I felt the smile rise inside my heart, and I smiled at the rose petals in my hands, and there I saw that my fingernails were dirty. I looked closer at the raking traces on the ground, and I noticed underneath the shimmering moon dust something darker shining through the surface. I decided not to share my observation, and I laid out the rose petals in the form of a heart, and I said proudly, "Look at my heart!" The man in black let the stem of the rose fall into the middle of the heart, and I continued. If I was a princess, I would live in a shimmering castle, and there would be a smiling rainbow and a talking boar. I can give you all of that right here on the moon, he answered promptly. Wonderful, I said, and I raked the moon dust together, and I began to build a castle. And as the castle became bigger, the dark layer underneath the shimmering surface became more and more exposed. The man in black startled me when he shouted, "Stop it!" And I stopped and I looked up, and there I saw the moon shine through the mist, and I heard the boar say, "Catch!" And I clapped my two hands together in the air, and here I was holding a shimmering white stone the size of a peach. When the man in black saw this, he almost jumped and he shouted, "That is not a moonstone! You're a fraud!" He pointed at my chest and added, "You don't even have a badge." "Because I'm not Elvis," I explained, and wondered about the moonstone and its effect on the foggy man. He couldn't stop looking at it, and the more he looked at it, the more the sky cleared, and it pushed back the fog. And when he saw the mist disintegrating, he became panicked, and the more he panicked, the faster clarity came. And when the heavenly bodies were all clear to see in the night sky, he asked me, "Who gave you that stone?" "I don't know," I said. The rainbow was smiling in my heart, and I stopped thinking, and I saw the moon behind the mist, and the boar in the bushes said, "Catch!" and there I was holding it. "You have to be kidding me," he shouted and slapped himself on the leg. "What is this? A high school drama play?" At this moment, out of the shadow of the fog, the boar came onto the scene. Not only did he have red spikes on the ends of his humongous tusks, he was also wearing a helmet with two horns on it. And when the man in black saw this, his jaw dropped. I thought the boar looked fabulous, and I cheered and clapped my hands, and I named him the Viking. And a flash of light came straight down from heaven and struck his helmet, and sparks came out of his hoofs, and they spread through the ground, and the light touched the rose petals in form of a heart, and they began to shine in all colors of the rainbow. And they left the ground and lingered in the air in form of a smile, above the Viking boar, as he spoke fluent theater. When the northern lights flowed into the earth, I was witness. When the fog of the parents tried to mislead the lovers, I was witness. When the court met in the twilight of judgment, I was witness. The moment he spoke the last word, a massive flash of light hit the ground, and it blew off the dust, and in one strike of the force, the whole picture cleared. And I saw perfect ripples moving on the surface of the water of the pond. The man of the mist lost it completely, and he screamed in a hysterical voice, "What happened?" Still in awe of the boar's striking performance under the smiling rose-petal rainbow, I said, joy-drunken, "You try to trick the first Space Force mascot with optics. But it turns out that I already have what you can't give." Without saying goodbye, the wide-shouldered, misty man in black left the park and never returned. The Viking boar and I enjoyed a moment under the stars when I asked him, "Where did that moonstone come from?" He snickered and said, "That was no moonstone. That was a white truffle." And together we snickered some more, and we talked until dawn about castles and water lilies and princesses on flying horses and baby ducks and other things. And before leaving, the boar asked me to let you know, remember and behold the beauty of the rose that is promised by the thorn. Thank you for listening. See you again next time.